Welcome, everyone, to our episode of Deconstructors Club. We're laughing because we were editing the introduction, and I had this brain fart of forgetting our own name.
Yeah.
But it was interesting after being so excited about the name in the first
Deconstructors Club. Yes, welcome.
My name is Alex Weiss. I am your host with Bob Azarito, your co-host, here with you. And so, we want to wish everyone a happy 4th of July, happy Independence Day. And it's an interesting subject because I wanted us to be able to talk about Christian nationalism and why there's so many of us that have deconstructed and left the evangelical church because of Christian nationalism.
Yeah, and there's so much disagreement about what does it mean to honor our country? What does it mean to celebrate the birth of our nation? And what is that about? And who are we? And where are we headed? And there's more disagreement than ever about what it means to be the United States of America.
Well, evangelicalism claims that this country is a Christian nation. Is that true, Bob? Are we in a Christian nation? Are we supposed to be in a Christian nation?
Yeah, well, and even what does that mean to be a Christian nation? So, a majority of people are Christians. Does that make, the founding fathers came to get away from state religion, and now all of a sudden we want to go back to that. I think our founding fathers might have a word to say about this interest of going back to a state-run religion.
Well, that's the reason why the First Amendment, we have freedom of religion. Yep. The reason why there's freedom of religion is so that the state would not control.
Because they saw so many ways in which it was abused. That's the reason they wanted to get away from it. And that's why the first thing they wanted to establish was a freedom of religion. And it's important to understand what that means. It's not anti-religion. It's just the state doesn't tell you, doesn't dictate to you what your religion must be.
Right. It's not anti-Christian.
No way.
In essence, it's a pluralism. It's giving everyone the freedom to be able to live in this country and follow the religion that they follow. Instead of saying, no, we're a Christian nation, everybody must be Christian.
But don't you remember when Jesus took the sword and forced the guy to convert by the tip of the sword, was going to kill him just prior to, and then finally the person became a Christian and Jesus, picked him up and hugged him. Don't you remember that story?
Was this the gospel of Bob Azarito?
It's so funny how the Christian nationalists want to quote the Bible, but they never actually think about Jesus.
Right.
And what he did while he was here on earth. Right. They had this idea that
and it had nothing to do with aligning with empire and taking over.
No.
Nothing to do with that.
The freedom of choice was a huge part of what Jesus stood for.
See, I was taught since I was a child that this is a Christian nation, and growing up in evangelicalism, and that we need to push along the agenda of Christianity. Well, according to our perspective, right, of our interpretation of Scripture, and push that along in, for instance, in the schools, in the public squares, into the courts and so forth and so on. And, we're actually seeing this going on with the governor.
In Louisiana. Where he passed some sort of a law where the schools have to display the 10 Commandments on the wall, as if that somehow makes that a Christian school. Or a Christian symbol of some sort? Which
is very interesting because it's not the words of Jesus. It's the 10 Commandments of the Old Testament, which was given for Judaism, for the Jews. Right. And yet Jesus establishing a new way of doing things, he spoke the Sermon on the Mount that he even said, you've heard it said, now I say, it's this way. Instead of putting the 10 Commandments in schools, why don't you put the Sermon on the Mount in there?
Yeah.
Which is totally different, but they won't because it goes against their controlling agenda, which is to, force people and impose on people a belief system that is completely flawed because of that.
And there's nothing less Christian than that.
Right. See, and the problem with this is that now they want to take this into legislation, create legislation to exclude people. And for instance, we're having issues, with LGBTQ the homophobia that evangelicalism has always had, and now they want to impose it through legislation. They want to push this agenda to discriminate, against LGBTQ, against transgender, against and so on and so on. One of the reasons why I left evangelicalism is because of that type of exclusion.
Interesting.
And another thing too is the racism, and that's the whole point of Christian nationalism. It's creating a religion that is in their image and likeness, not in God's image and likeness, because it doesn't follow Jesus. Jesus is the image of God. Mm-hmm. And because it's not following Jesus, they are creating this religion according to their own image and likeness. And they're using Jesus as a mascot. He's a mascot for their agenda. By utilizing him, they want to impose his authority on people, which is really their own authority. And in doing so, they have created their own, or their intent is to create their own authoritarian regime.
And it's really subtle because they don't want anyone to know. They wouldn't accept that observation because they're trying to position themselves as the ones who really care about America,
right?
The ones who really care about our past and our future, that really will take care of the population, the ones that can be trusted to really find a system that really works for everyone. Mm-hmm. they have it so twisted that people are convinced that they can be trusted. It's very interesting.
And it's not even, in essence, a deception. They literally believe this is true.
Yes.
It is a deception in general, but they believe that they're right. They believe that they are doing this for the cause of God and the cause of Christ. That what they're doing, they're aligning with a political party. They're aligning with a extreme conservative ideals. And by doing so, they feel like this is God's agenda. And because it's God's agenda, it has to be imposed. This is the mission, to impose this, legislate this, and people have to fall in line.
What's interesting to me is I want to say in my head that they've completely misunderstood the word Christian. I want to say that. And I believe it. I believe that they, as far as the principles of Jesus, they've misunderstood. But as far as history is concerned,
right?
Yes. We've seen this over and over and over again, starting with Constantine, the first place it started.
And the church aligned with empire. That's where corruption began.
Power is very seductive.
Right.
And here are these people who've been persecuted, essentially, for being Christian. They didn't follow the gods of Rome. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, here comes an emperor, Constantine, who's going to decide that Christianity is going to be the religion of the empire. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, the Christian church couldn't resist. It was like, what? We're going to have power? Mm-hmm. We're going to be able to tell people what to do? And then all of a sudden, blink your eyes, and we're taking trips to the Holy Land to kill a bunch of Ottoman Turks, or to take Jerusalem back from
and it's so
Islam.
Interesting because it began with when you shift the power control, where now the church is in power, not the minority, not the oppressed, group of people, not the persecuted group of people. Now it's the ones in power. So they have this privilege, and here it goes, to be able to redefine Christianity in their own image.
Pick and choose.
Where their theology just begins to change. They begin to debate, and all of these councils start happening. And then they start talking about what the Bible should look like, canonizing it and how things should. This whole mentality of now that we're in power, we get to decide.
I hope nobody votes this November for an issue, for a position on abortion, on the border, on Gaza. I hope nobody votes because they think this particular person supports my issue, lower taxes, whatever it is, whatever your issue is. I hope people vote in order that this country can remain a free democracy. I hope that's the only issue people pay attention to,
Right.
because I want to be able to vote for people that support my particular opinion about a particular issue. I want to be able to do that. But this time, the issue is different. The issue is whether or not next July 4th, we will feel like we can actually work for change.
See, but some of us don't feel that way. Some of us actually do want to stand with the immigrant. Some of us do want to stand with the marginalized and the oppressed. Some of us do believe in liberation to the point where we are not going to sacrifice that, which means sometimes we won't align with a
Absolutely.
candidate
Yeah.
basically that even says that he is, but he really isn't, for innocent lives, for, you know, the atrocities that have been going on.
Yeah.
So it's difficult. It's
Yeah.
difficult. We're in a difficult situation. That's all we could say.
I understand.
And, you know, I understand where you're coming from, but I also do have my own
I don't think
conscience.
Yeah, I want to fight for those things. I think we should fight for those things. I just want to make sure that next July 4th, we can still fight for those things. So we can still fight for them, because I think we're facing a situation in which we may not have an avenue to fight for anything.